Well, good morning. My name is Connie Williams. This lesson is part of a climate conversations class that my friend Connie, her name is also Connie, and I are teaching on Zoom for the University of Arizona's continuing education program. The issue of addressing climate change is deeply dependent on public trust in science and institutions who are urging action in the face of widespread disinformation campaigns designed to delay or even prevent action altogether. Our position is that we all have a responsibility to use best information evaluation practices ourselves and to identify and support the sources that provide it. Today, we will cover fake news, lying with statistics, and the basics of climate denial a little bit. At the end are our standard questions for discussion. We hope that you might watch this with one or more other people and have your own discussion following the talk. So let's see, I'm going to share my screen and bring up. Trust is the glue of life. It is the most essential ingredient in effective communication. It's the foundational principle that holds all relationships. Stephen Covey wrote a book, I think in about the 90s, called 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. We have a problem with trust in America these days. This was a graph taken out of The Atlantic clear back in January of 2018. The article was Trust is Collapsing in America, and they point out countries with trust gains, typical changes up or down, and then 6 countries with extreme trust losses. The US is in woeful condition here, and you can make a point that probably the number has gotten worse by 2021. Fake News 101, evaluating information. We're going to talk about how to recognize fake news and avoid being fooled by it. For one thing, fake news is intended to mislead. The source persists in promoting the information after it has been clearly proven false. This compares with not fake news, which is real news that may have a liberal or a conservative focus, and they may occasionally make mistakes, but they correct these mistakes and they do not repeat them. This information that I'm going to give you about fake news actually comes from the University of Central Florida libraries. You can find this kind of information a number of different places, just happened to be one that I like the way they had it organized. Here's another thing. This is something I see a lot. Fake news cannot be verified. It often does not have links to the information it asserts, or if you follow those links and look, the information that they're linked to doesn't in fact match what the sensational headlines have proclaimed. Read your articles. Or this is another one I sometimes see, the links lead to other work within the reporting site's domain. So if you have the Heritage Foundation, which is a big think tank that has done a lot to put out disinformation through a number of their satellite organizations, you will find links to those satellite organizations. That should be at least considered suspect, not necessarily fake news, but you be on your guard. This compares with not fake news. It has links to the source of the information. These links, when followed, support the claims being made. They're from outside the reporting site's domain. So what makes a news story fake? Can't be verified, and it appeals to your emotion. It makes you outraged or smug and self-satisfied. This is to ensure you're not going to do anything as pesky as fact-checking. The authors usually aren't experts, or perhaps they're experts in a different field. It comes from fake sites. Now, I never get information from social media. I just don't even see it. But Did your article come from abcnews.com? Probably okay. But if it's abcnews.com.co, be wary. Merkala.com, realnewsrightnow.com. Again, according to the University of Central Florida, which is probably looking at a lot of social media sites, these are a source of fake news. Look for bias. But there's bias in just almost everything. So it's bias in and of itself is not necessarily bad, conscious, unconscious, obvious, or subtle, but watch for it. Watch for the kind of adjectives they use. Are they inflammatory? It doesn't necessarily mean that's fake news, but your guard should be up. Who's making the claim and how credible is their work in this field? With the pandemic, early on, there was a gastroenterologist who was making a lot of news because he was saying, we need to go for herd immunity. He's a gastroenterologist, not a, like Dr. Anthony Fauci, who's a specialist in the area of pandemics. So, just with that information, let's take a look and see what we can do if we look at a fake newsletter to the editor. Now, this caught my eye. This was the Green Valley News, November in 2019. The whole opinion column is called In My View, and I really like their heading, Base Climate Decisions on Data. Now, who wrote it is at the very bottom of the piece, but I've included it here with the headline because, if you're going to assess something, you want to know who wrote it. I've left the names and the specifics out. It's not about them. It's kind of about the story. But we find that she's a retired economic geologist, master's degree from Dartmouth College. He's a retired mining engineer. He was 8 years as a director of a water agency in California. I want to hear what they have to say. So I'm going to show you, we're not going to go through their entire whole letter to the editor. There were other problems with it, but the kind of the arc of their narrative, the main paragraph that tells you what they're trying to promote, I am going to show you. So as you read it, and I'm going to have you read it to yourself, what is the main point they're trying to get across, and what questions do we have? I might also add, are there any things we can do to follow up, to fact check a little bit? So read it to yourself. Okay, tough to read that one, isn't it? One of the things that occurs to me is this section right here with all the parentheses and the numbers in it was pulled out of a paper. This is not the sort of thing that should be in a letter to the editor. It's difficult reading. It's very scholarly, but it made me instantly suspicious because this is a technique called baffling them with BS, or you could say it out the whole way. This is the sort of thing that is kind of designed to make people go, oh, master's degree from Dartmouth, head of the water department, very smart. They're using all this in really important language. They must be right. So that's a little hard to deal with right now. Let's just pull that down as baffling with BS and take a look here. 2004 Friends of Science Society report shows an agreement among scientists is near 50%, not 97%. Well, this may be the heart of what they're trying to get at. If you can read this at all, they've thrown suspicions on the reports that claim 97% of scientists agree that global warming is caused by humans. But here they've given us 50%, not 97% is more accurate. Well, Friends of Society, we can look that up. We turn right away to Wikipedia. And they say Friends of Science, nonprofit advocacy organization based in Canada. The organization rejects the established scientific conclusion that humans are responsible for the currently observed global warming. Okay, they're an advocacy organization. They don't accept um, that humans are responsible for climate change. Here's what they do think. They propose that the sun is the main direct and indirect driver of climate change rather than human activity. Well, we can check that. This is a particularly good year to check that, in fact, because there's been a lot of news in the last couple of years because the sun goes through cycles. There's a lot of solar output during some years, and then it goes quiet for a little while, and then it goes back out to a lot of output. During the quiet years, which looks like here, the quiet years cratered in about 2017 and will probably last until what, maybe 2022. We're right here. We're at the minimum. So if the sun controls the climate based on the solar minimum in 2019, 2020, we would expect a slight cooling of the Earth's temperature. The sun controls it, if that's true. We also know that this has been a very strong La Nina. We have, if you look at sea surface temperatures, you see this big cold water area in the Southern Pacific, and La Ninas typically have a cooling effect on global temperatures. So oceans working together with the sun, every piece of evidence suggests that this should be, if the friends of science are right, a very cool year. That's not what we saw. 2020, I just pulled this as a screenshot off my computer. They happen to be together. NPR says 2020 is virtually tied for the hottest year on record. NBC News says 2020 likely to end up the hottest year on record. The friends of science, their basic assumption is questionable. It seems that global warming, which is the other alternative here, is overwhelming any impacts from the sun or from big ocean patterns. Just to finish this, they argued against the Kyoto Protocol, founded in 2002, launched its website that year. But here it is. They're largely funded by the fossil fuel industry. And we think fossil fuel industry, and all of a sudden we're reminded that she's an economic geologist and he's a mining engineer. We know that economic geologists and mining engineers work to extract. They're involved with the extraction industry, taking things out of the ground for sale. So suddenly all of this makes some sense with that advocacy group for the fossil fuel industry. So now we really don't trust them. Here, in fact, this comes from skepticalscience.com, which is my go-to site for fact-checking some of these claims. There have actually been 7 studies about the agreement of scientists as to whether humans are causing human-caused global warming. And you can see of those 7, one said 100%, 4 of them said 97, 91, 93. All of these are in the 90%. This is, incidentally, an absolutely gorgeous use of data visualization, because using a circle graph here lets us really compare the number of scientists who don't agree to the number of scientists who do. And they're just kind of friendly looking. But if we just take the outliers out, 91, 93, and 100, we're left with 97%, even if we can't do the fancy math that might be involved to create an equivalency between all these papers and average them. There was one more thing in this that kind of concerned me. I want to go back to it. I was familiar with the Dorian and Zimmerman 2009 paper, but I didn't know this bit. Only 79 out of 3,000 people responded to the survey. That's a bit of a worry. I want to look into that a little bit more. But here's something else that's just weird about that I might not have even noticed if this hadn't caught my eye. They're saying that because 79 out of 3,000 responded, that is not a consensus. That's a red flag because that's not how you build consensus, by looking at how many people respond to a survey. So there is already a red flag, but here's something I want to follow up on. So we go back to Wikipedia, and here's the part from Wikipedia. Here is they received replies from, and I put it up here, they received replies from 3,146. That's not how many surveys they sent out. This is how many replied. The number they sent out was actually 10,000. So that's 1 in 3. That's an absolutely respectable number. So for them to say 79 out of 3,000, that is misinformation, or shall I say disinformation. They also noted one thing that's mentioned here that I hadn't seen before that is kind of interesting. Economic geologists, remember that was what her job was, and meteorologists are among the biggest doubters, with only 47% of the economic geologists and 64% of the meteorologists agreeing that human activity was a contributing factor to global warming. So you can see how fun it is to actually fact check these things. Well, here's how this all fits in. Denial fundamentals fall into mostly 5 categories. It's not real, it's not us, it's not bad. By the way, these are kind of fading as it's becoming quite obvious it is real, it is us, and it is bad. But so this is a big one right now, and the last one. Experts are unreliable and climate solutions won't work. So they have focused on this one. Experts are unreliable. I think with denial fundamentals, I love this little cartoon. Here's this guy with a t-shirt that says warming is a big fat hoax. I don't believe in climate change. But the Grim Reaper, the climate catastrophes, look down on him and just go, I don't care. Unfortunately, the strategy that the economic geologist and the mining engineer were employing are effective. 55% of adults who believe most scientists think global warming is happening in 2020 is terrifying. And you can see across the country, there's a lot of people in that less than half of that county believes that scientists think that most scientists think global warming is happening. Now here's Pima County and Santa Cruz County. Pima County looks like 65 to 70%, and Pima County is just at least it's over 50. We've got work to do. This, by the way, Yale Climate Opinion Maps, this was put out September 2nd, 2020. These things are awesome. I would check them out. One of the things you can do is go here and check this little down arrow and get different kinds of questions and see how the map changes. Okay, now, so we're going to look at lying with statistics. This is always fun. So look at any graphs or charts that they give you. Look for cherry picking of data. I saw this a lot in 2013-14 when I first started investigating climate change. Here's what you would see. Ron Klutz was very famous for this. He would show you this, this is data for sea surface temperature anomalies, and he's got this sea surface temperature, changes in temperature here. He's got the years across, and he's showing that the ocean is certainly not warming. In fact, it looks like it's cooling a little bit. But what happens when you go back and you look at the full range of data? Climate science is never based on a 3-year average. Climate science is always based on a 20, 30, 50, even 100-year average. And if you look at this average, there's the piece he was looking at, but when you put it in context, this shows the ocean is warming. So that is called cherry picking. Look at the source of data. Is it reliable? I'm sorry about this. It's not a very exciting slide, but we just got to get through it. Things that are, this is according to the University of Florida, but it matches pretty much my own experience. Official government websites, NOAA, NASA, EPA, institutional sites that represents universities, regulatory agencies, governing bodies, respected organizations with specific expertise. That's like the Mayo Clinic. peer-reviewed journals, not any old magazine, but peer-reviewed journals and reputable news sources. And you need to do due diligence for a while to find the ones that you absolutely trust. I ask you to be very cautious using blogs, web forums, individual or business websites. And this is the one that I see the most: materials published by an entity that may have an ulterior motive. I read blogs. I sometimes read some of these other things, but I use them to get ideas to go explore further, not as a basis of information. Peer review process, you may already know this. Basically, a group of scientists usually studies something and write up the results. They send it off to a paper to be published. The editor then takes a look at it and finds people who are experts in the specific field of that paper, sends it to them for review. They look it over quite critically. They have a vested interest in making sure that garbage science doesn't get put out as in a publication that we are meant to trust. So then after they've made their changes, they send it back to the editor, who sends it back to the scientists. If the problems aren't very big, they'll send it back to the science to be corrected. And then once they're corrected, it gets published. Or an editor may just choose to not publish it if the review goes that way. Okay, this next one is fun. Axis labels on graphs. This is too fun. Okay, so here we are. This, and I want to start off right now. This says ABC News, and it also says the Washington Post here. I could not find these anywhere in those two sites. So I suspect this entire graph to be fake news. But let's take a look at the graph. This is about the Trump transition, favorability on taking office. They've got Obama. This is the Democratic presidents versus the Republican presidents here. And what you can see, it's a bar graph, but they didn't put any kind of an axis label down here. So this kind of bothered me that this is 40%. So I went in ahead and just drew in my own axis label, tried to line it up there with the end, put in something, eyeballed it in the middle and at 25 and 75%. Well, this one really is wrong. This belongs clear down here. So 56, 58, 65 belong in kind of this area. 78 and 79 belong up here. Those are a little too far this way. This one is certainly too far. But you can see these numbers may be right. The bars are completely wrong. And take a look at that. Look at that colored section. How is that misleading? Yeah, at 79%, Obama's got the very short, very colorful, but he's got the smallest amount of whatever good thing it is. And Trump's got the largest. That gives you the impression, if you're not reading carefully, that Trump, boy, he exceeded Obama by 4 times. If the correct way to do this is not to color the empty space, it's to color the bars. So this is another way this data is designed to mislead. Does the data make sense with what you already know? Well, this was one in Snopes. It's just silly, but are wombats inviting animals into their burrows to escape Australia wildfires? Snopes gives it a mixture. Yeah, the burrows are really big, and so some animals may have gotten in there, but definitely wombats are not inviting them in. Highly recommend Snopes. Beware emotional content. Social media selects for content that most drives polarization. Outrage is effective clickbait. We see outrage motivating a lot of clicks, and every one of those clicks equal money. Highly recommend a Netflix documentary called The Social Dilemma that's about exactly that. I thought I knew about this issue, and I was I it was watching this, even so, was very sobering. Highly recommend it. So, 4 tips for spotting fake news. Summerharvard.edu. You can read it there. Snopes, PolitiFact, Fact Check, the Washington Post Fact Checker, all good places to go. Um, but one last thing before we end this, and that is this: we are all susceptible to buying into fake news. This is called, it's got a name, it's called confirmation bias. Confirmation bias means we seek information that confirms our existing opinions and discount information that does not. In other words, there's a whole body of objective facts out there, but here's what we think. This is the only piece that is easy for us to see. When we're working with our confirmation bias, we look for information that supports what we already believe, and we argue like a lawyer. This proves me right, instead of like a scientist, which is, oh, this is new evidence that I hadn't considered before. So what we covered today, spotting fake news and critical reading. We looked at how do you evaluate information. We looked at graphs, bias, emotional content. We talked about the 5 denial basics. Can you remember those? And we didn't talk about climate change. I left it off this video. But our basic discussion questions are data integrity. Are there some pieces of the data that I presented that you do not agree with? You want to talk about it? What are your reactions? What are the key takeaways that you have after seeing this? Is there need for further information in some piece of this? And then action opportunities. We have a big problem with people not following even the most basic critical reading skills. So what could you do to help change that? And then anything else you can think about. So hope you have an enjoyable discussion and hope you checked the website to see if there's any new videos. Thank you.